Thank you. I'm really honored today to introduce one of my friends for many years. And I think his background is very easy. Just check from the internet, you see everything. It will take 1 hour to introduce him. But I only have 3 minutes, so I would just say a few things. I get to know Bob in the 70s. In that time, many large American corporations have subsidiary in overseas, but they always have a white American man to be the chair, the head of that organization. Bob was the first one break glass ceiling and become the head of Taicel, one part of the ITT in Taiwan. He was the first one, and in that time, all the old companies, he became the first CEO of a subsidiary in Taiwan. That's one of the accomplishments he has done. Another thing I think is very important, he was the first one introduced people about Foxconn. At that time, most people don't know Foxconn was building mold, and then start molding, then start building switches. He was the one which introduced all the Taiwan company, like Acer and other companies. And so people like me at the time, we were able to go to Taiwan, get them to do the OEM for us, to manufacture for us. I think it's very, very important to know that he was the first one help Foxconn to become well-known today as #1 manufacturing for Apple, for many other companies. I think the third one, I hope is through the years, as a friend, I always ask him about what's happening in mainland China, what happened to Asia. I was 2 terms advisor to President Bush, President Clinton as a trade negotiation. So we negotiate all the trade. I was the only Asian American in that team. They think I'm the expert, but they don't know is I always talk to Bob first and to find out what's happening. So I just wanted, very shortly, but then last but not the least, is if you give him a microphone, if the music starts, he can sing beautifully for the whole evening. So now I turn it over to him. And maybe, I don't know if we have the music or not, but he's going to tell us everything about what very important for us to know what's happening to Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Not everything David said was true, but I accept his goodwill. Also, thanks Simon for inviting me. Although Simon told me I was far from his first choice, because for this 100-year centennial anniversary celebration, Simon would rather have somebody who's at least close to 100 years old than can tell us what happened in the last 100 years. And he couldn't find, so he found somebody who's not even close to what the ideal, but would do, okay? So we got together and said, okay, you don't have your best choice as a speaker, but at least we give a great title to draw people to this dinner. That's why it's a very imposing title. What's next? Building on half a century of Greater China's technology sector. Actually, for a 40 minutes talk, if we have to cover all the technology sectors in Greater China, and particularly we're 45 minutes behind schedule, it's not possible. So don't blame me for false advertising. But I also realized that the first criteria to be a dinner time speaker is not trying to be very serious, trying to be very technical, even though this is technical society, but above all, to be entertaining. And so I thought that maybe the best way to talk about the last half a century of the profound development in Greater China, propelled by technology, and the role CIE and its members have played, is sort of to tell some stories, anecdotes. Through that, and sketch what happened, and perhaps we can contemplate what is there to come. This is also because I am not a trained professional historian, and I am limited by my experience and knowledge, even though I'm not young. So, a little bit background where I covered. I was born in Chongqing. I grew up in Taiwan. I studied in the U.S. I work in the U.S. I guess very typical, similar to many older people in this room, not the younger ones. And but in my late 20s, I went back to Taiwan, as David said, to work for ITT, and I have not returned to the U.S. to live since 1974. And I worked based in Taiwan. I worked for multinationals, work in technology, world trade, and then in the mid-50s, I went to China mainland. So at least I have many years covering these grounds. My exposure and the experience is limited to telecom, information industries, internet fields, as well as automotive and the mechanical fields. Through operational investment experience and through board directorships. Although the bulk of my experience is in telecom and IT, encompassing the whole fields, R&D, manufacturing, logistics, service, marketing, etc. So until recently, my forays into automotive and mechanical seems to be disjointed with my other experience. But interesting enough, autonomous car now is bringing this whole thing together. And that is a very interesting field. It's not just going to change technology product, but it's changing culture and changing the way our life is going to be. But autonomous car is an interesting, large field, and that is not the talk for tonight. So back to anecdotes and storytelling to sketch out the last 50 years for the parts that I know. I'm sure we change another speaker, you will tell a different set of anecdotes. So some of the things I said probably is interesting to you. I think the first thing we'll talk about, for those of us who are younger in this room, we might think the PC has been there forever. No, PC was a story started in the early 80s. But much of Taiwan's high tech in our high tech field started with PC and grow out of that. And a CIE member is instrumental, in fact, who started the whole PC business in Taiwan. It is not Stan Shi. It is not Matthew Miao. It is your David Lee. David. In the early 80s, David and I both worked for ITT, because ITT bought David's company, Kuhn, for those older may remember. And David then joined ITT, head up the high-tech group other than telecom infrastructure. And IBM was doing great with its PC and selling a 25% price premium to the other myriads of PC suppliers. And David convinced ITT, said ITT was an iconic name in those days, perhaps even more prominent than General Electric is relative to today. So ITT thought we could also sell PC at 25% premium. And I have to say that ITT in the high-tech field was in telecommunication, where one generation equipment lasts for 15 years. And David, from idea to prototype to a product, was in 6 months, a PC. Really impressed people. So David went to Taiwan. I was working in Taiwan for ITT then. And selected eventually 2 companies. In fact, I would not even say companies, two group of people to start making PC. They were the very, very first of PC in Taiwan. One group was led by Stan Shi, and the other group was led by Matthew Miao Fengqiang. They were not in PC business, other than making something some of us may remember, a teaching aid called Little Professor, 小教授. That's far from commercial PC. They didn't do anything. And they would never pass ITT's supply chain management. They didn't even know how to write documentation. Never mind. But David and his team taught these people how to do it. In fact, probably written a lot of the documentation for them. And David talked with Intel to increase 8086 allocation to Taiwan. That was the beginning of the Taiwan PC industry. Thank you, David. Thank you, CIE. Another great contribution of CIE is to help Taiwan launch the semiconductor industry. And this was, again probably in the early 80s. And Taiwan, it was the government put up $5 million US, bought a license from RCA, $5 million. And at that time, there was a lot of doubters, because there was already US, there was already Japan, there was also Korea, and there was Germany, and maybe France too at the time, already in semiconductor. Taiwan was absolutely too late and too little. But of course, we know history developed differently. And one of the most important contributions to the Taiwan development is people. And many of those people were CIE members. In the earlier 80s, I was on the Winbang electronics board. They were making DRAM, they were making IC. And come on to quite a number of those companies in those days in Taiwan. A brand new company in semiconductor, starting business from scratch, but with a core technical team with 15 years experience. Where did they get the 15 years? Fairchild, Intel. National Semiconductor, and many of them CIE members. Again, CIE contributed to this very important part of the Taiwan development. So you might ask, okay, we're talking about half a century. So before 1980, what did the Taiwan do? Well, in the 70s, Taiwan moved from consumer electronics, making radios, making TVs, to industrial electronics. Again, I was fortunate to be part of that because 1974, ITT sent me back to Taiwan to build a telephone central switch factory, including R&D and engineering. And to increase localization, we developed quite a number of local vendors, bring them into the industrial electronics level. One company, we transferred vertical injection molding technology. And from that base, that company moved down to precision mechanics and eventually grow into a company everybody knows. That's Terry Guo and Foxconn. Another company was making consumer-grade PC boards. We transferred the know-how. We developed their capability to make industrial grade. And we, upon success, we gave them ITT, not ITT Taiwan, ITT worldwide certification of a qualified vendor. And this entrepreneur founder was very smart. Literally, the very next day, with that certificate, he flew to the US. With that, when he knocked on IBM's door, Compaq's door, they answered the bell. And to this day, Huatong Compaq is still the leading PC board manufacturer in Taiwan and in the world. Just to add one more, we developed a company from scratch making thick film hybrids. And that's Huanong, this is another. So these are just, as I said, I'm limited by my personal experience. This is how Chinese Americans in the US, in those days, when Taiwan was starting from scratch, that we contributed our experience, our connection, our know-how, and helped make history. Of course, the Taiwan development is also helped by government's industrial policy. And the government industrial policy is more than just having import tariffs, having other regulations. But in the Taiwan case, and you were talking about ITRI. ITRI was the government-sponsored industrial technology research institute. And ITRI went into many new technologies. The word incubator didn't exist, but ITRI was the incubator. We don't have time this evening to go into to name examples, but many of you know, your friends or you personally have worked in ITRI, and the government paid for the risky and the front end. Then the people took that and created companies. So Taiwan had an incubation back in the 80s. It is not something new. The world always comes around. Nothing is new in that sense. Everything is new. But industrial policy is important for developing economies to to move along. And implementing industrial policy, probably nobody is as thorough, as effective as China mainland. The very basic industrial policy of China mainland, as I started the discussing dialogue, working there in the 80s, mid-80s, is exchanging domestic market for technology. You don't bring in technology, there is no market for you. You bring technology, but you form joint ventures. Joint venture is a way for the Chinese government to ensure technology does come in. That's why everything is a joint venture in China. That's why it makes business difficult to run, because you bring different cultures together, and partners have different missions. But overall, it worked. And because of the scale of China, today you have leading world-size enterprises that Taiwan could never have. That's the difference between 1.3 billion people and 23 million people. So industrial policy is important. Exchanging market for technology. And technology, in the interpretation of the leadership of China, is exhibited by IP and patent. If you don't have patent, you don't have technology. Business model is not technology. Although, really, in Silicon Valley, we know sometimes business model is far more important than technology. But that's not how it's interpreted in China. That's why Facebook, Google, among other reasons, never got into China, because they're viewed, I think, they have a business model. They don't have a patent on that business model. So the Chinese industrial policy makes sure the Baidus, the Twitters, the Tencents, and the Alibabas have a chance to copy, to emulate, to improve upon that business technology, business model, and leveraging the ever larger Chinese economy in scale to grow into much bigger enterprises. So industrial policy is important. So as a side, I know this is California, okay, say anything good about Donald Trump maybe not good for personal health, but I would say perhaps President Trump's emphasizing the principle of the industrial technology may not be wrong to solve the issue of the disappearance and withering of the middle class. Although I think nobody in this room is middle class, we're all the 1%. But the 99% will wake up one day and through democracy vote to confiscate everything we got, democratically. So industrial policy is important, and that's how the Greater China sector developed. And CIE continued to make contribution, and it was mentioned here, the MATS conferences biannual with Taiwan since the 1966, and the Sino-American Technology Science Conference biannual with China since 1993. And Dr. David Wang working with CIMEC. Zhang Rujing was Zhongxin, and Dr. Gao Qiquan from Taiwan, working with Tsinghua Ziguang, and many in the room are serving as venture founders and board directors for enterprises like Sina, NetEase, and everything else. And continue also to impart the entrepreneurship that really only Silicon Valley excels to China, because innovation is what's going to make difference as we move further into the 21st century. And also, as China's domestic economy continue to grow, it is the second largest economy. In another 20 years, it'll be the largest, even without the purchasing parity normalization. So therefore, how to harvest the fruits of that domestic economy. And also, Chinese enterprises are moving out of China. Alibaba is expressing aspiration for the US to the tune of creating, I forgot, 100,000 or 1 million jobs for Donald Trump by Ma Yun. Again, these need people. These need people who understand China, at the same time understand the Western world. And CIE, again, can contribute. And this is also the opportunity for CIE's members, not just the younger ones, because we all now seem to be living forever, at least 120 years. So even David and I will have another 40 years of working life. Lots of opportunities. So again, it is a great honor to be invited to be a speaker for this 100-year centennial dinner, and that very few organizations can last 100 years. That speaks to the vitality of CIE. And again, congratulations. I'll be back in another 100 years.
Is there any Q&A? Well, I think Mr. Mao is right. I'm sure that our audience here today has a lot of questions. So, Mr. Mao, if you could come back to the stage again, anyone here in our audience for questions and answers.
Okay. Yes. Because I thought I was behind schedule.
This is a golden opportunity. Oh, there are 2 microphones at the back of the room, or you can just raise your hand and we'll give you a microphone.
Hello, hi. My name is David Lee. I'm actually from Boston. So can you compare the culture between the East Coast and the West Coast in engineering and science?
You mean East Coast or West Coast United States?
Yeah.
Okay, again, I'll give you an anecdote. I was working for Nortel. This was 1999 maybe. And we bought a West Coast company. Nortel's East Coast, okay? Canadian, but East Coast, Ottawa, Toronto. And we bought a company called Bay Networks, some of you may remember. And in the first get-together, integration meeting, the notice dress code business casual. And when we all showed up, the Bay Networks people said, we can tell who's Bay Networks and who is Nortel. The Bay Networks people came with no ties, and the Nortel people came with loud ties. That was our business casual. So that is the East Coast and West Coast on a superficial level, but actually it's more than superficial. East Coast probably is more disciplined, maybe. But the other side of the coin, discipline is not as flexible, not as innovative. But again, things change. I'm sure Professor Zheng, from us in MIT, we don't think we're any less innovative than the West Coast, right? And the research triangle is also very vibrant, and Texas is doing well. So I think it's probably very difficult now to say what is East Coast, what is West Coast. It's almost like any good Chinese restaurant has Peking duck.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
How do you see Alibaba's future?
If I really know what is Alibaba's future, I'll be lying on some beach counting my millions. I think Alibaba, as I said, Alibaba, Baidu, they need to break out of China. Okay? JD is giving a run for Alibaba's money. When you become number one, after a while, the only place to go is down. So Alibaba has to come out. As I said, Mr. Mao told Donald Trump he's going to create 100,000 jobs or 1 million jobs. That's simply because he's going to come to the U.S. and do the same thing as in China and to sell for small, medium enterprises. For everything they sell, that he created a job. He may be successful, but up to now, no Chinese giants have been successful outside of China. So I don't know what's their future and the future growth. Can Alibaba really take on Amazon in the US? I don't know. But again, here is maybe for Alibaba to be successful in the US, Mr. Mao needs CIE.
Okay. Taiwan government is now doing the Asia Silicon Valley,
Yes.
or 亚洲矽谷. Also, the profit margin of hardware is gradually decreasing and not comparable to the software. And also all the social media things, also the sharing economy. So I was wondering, can you share with us your insight about what 亚洲矽谷 can do, and also the newer future of this business trend?
Okay, first of all, I really don't know the details of Taiwan's Asian Silicon Valley. As I said, actually Silicon Valley is unique. It is culture, it's people, it is attitude, it's almost reflex. It's not something that easily that you can copy just because you build 17 buildings and you dump $70 billion and it's going to happen. I think starting from attitude. In Silicon Valley, if you fail the business, you are a hero. In China, in Taiwan, maybe a little less, but still, if you failed, you failed. That is the difference. So it is not that easy. And particularly when it's government-driven. Silicon Valley did not succeed because the invisible hand of government in the back pushing. When you have governments pushing, when you depend on government programs and fundings, they answer to a different call. Why in the banking sector there's no innovation in China, in Taiwan? Because you lose one NT, you pay. There's no such a thing as acceptable 1% bad loan. So I don't know the details, but I'm just saying it's not that easy. It's not that easy to copy Silicon Valley. Yes. I also answer you. You said, okay, hardware is shrinking, it's software, it's social media. But remember, the reason software starts thriving is precisely because hardware, the clock speed, and the integration getting to the point that the software you've written can react very fast. So at the end, maybe I'm old, so I love hardware. At the end of the day, without the hardware platform, software 空中楼阁. So it is so actually the last half a century, what is the most important trend? It's Moore's law. Moore's law changed everything. And we talk about Foxconn. Terry, a good friend, 40-some years, so he's great. He didn't invent outsourcing. Moore's law evolved, getting to the point that the ever larger critical mass or boundary size got to be that even in our days, ITT was not big enough. Apple is not big enough. So you need to aggregate. Therefore, you outsource. And that was also driven by hardware. Of course, hardware is not by itself, it's software written on it. We can talk about autonomous car. Again, it's because hardware speed has gotten to the point that you can brake the car without hitting somebody through the internet, GPS, because you're fast enough. So you can't say, maybe professors like, or strawman discussion, you like to say, pure hardware, pure software, pure social media. Actually, it's all integrated.
Mr. Mao, I would take the chance to ask the last question today. It's my great honor to be on the stage with you because I'm also a former HP employee.
Oh.
Yeah, but not for HP China, it's actually for the headquarters.
Yes.
So it's my great honor to be meeting you today. Anyways, just now you mentioned that I was born in a century where there was already computer out there. And then we're also experiencing a lot of technology innovation in the past, let's say, 30 years. So what do you see is the new wave of next technology innovation, both in the US and in China? And do you think there is a difference?
In the US, somebody said here, okay, the US went from railroad, bridges, to cars, to chips, to internet. But what's the next wave? Fixing infrastructure, railroads, bridges again. Okay, what is the next wave? The next wave, as we said, software, hardware, fast enough, it becomes real time. Real time, if you look at all the recent changes, is to save people's time. Some people say to create time. Maybe someday in 20 years that a new baby is born, we put a chip in the head, and in the back, we can connect with the millions of nodes in the brain. We don't have to go to school anymore. I will be smarter than David.
Thank you very much.
All these can be happening. I mean, today, if you look at science fiction 50 years ago, a lot of it came true. So we don't know what's coming, but we know it's exciting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mao. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have a small gift for you, a certification of appreciation. Let's welcome Yazhou and Simon to give that award to you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.